What's going on, guys? Today I'm bringing you my 2022 NHL season predictions. I know I'm a couple days late on this, but with NHL 22 being out, I had a bunch of other videos to work on. I also wanted to wait until the season started, make sure all the roster movement got finished. With hoping Eichel would get traded, as I feel whatever team lands him, obviously, will probably jump at least one spot up in my standing prediction. But he's still on Buffalo, so can't wait any longer for that to happen. I'm gonna start off with the Pacific Division here. At the number 8 spot, I have the San Jose Sharks. I feel like they're a team on the decline. They're aging defensemen who were once good, getting worse, have those big bloated contracts in Carlson, Burns, and Edward Vlasic. Aren't getting any younger, have some injury issues there. I feel like their forward group had some good players in the top 6, but was definitely lacking some depth. And with Evander Kane possibly not playing the entire season, Thomas Hertl may be getting traded. He's got 1 year left on his contract. I feel like if they're not a good team during the season, they probably don't risk losing him to free agency for nothing. He'll be dealt a deadline. I don't see the Sharks having a good year. Have them finishing 8th place there in the Pacific. Following them is another California team at number 7. I have the Anaheim Ducks. I feel like they're a young team that's improving, but I don't see it being enough to get a playoff spot. Obviously, a lot of young forwards there in Zegras, McTavish making the team. Steele's still there. Troy Terry. They got Raquel, obviously. Getzlav is back. Defensively, Dry still hoping for a big year. Still have a solid defense, I think, too, with Lindholm, Fowler, Manson. Goalie, I like John Gibson, but again, I just think too many young, unproven players, and it's just not going to be enough for them to, push in that playoff spot. Now, number 6 here, a team in a very similar position. I just like the make of the roster a little bit more. That's the LA Kings. I think Anze Kopitar is the best player between the two teams. Kyle Peterson gives you decent enough goaltending. Drew Doughty, although he's not a 90 in NHL, we all know he's not a superstar anymore, is still a decent enough defenseman. The rest of the guys there, they're capable. They're not world beaters or anything. Offensively, though, I really like the addition of Victor Arvidsson to that top 6. Philip Deneau as well, really good defensive option. Byfield, if he made the team, would have been nice. Obviously, he got injured, but some other really good young players there. In Gabe Velarde, Alex Turcotte, if he can make the team. Like I said, someone to Anaheim, I don't see them being embarrassed or anything this season. They'll be relatively competitive, but it won't be enough for a playoff spot. Next year at number 5, a team that underperformed last year, I think might underperform again. That's the Calgary Flames. I feel like losing Mark Giordano, their captain, a big part of their defense, is a huge hit for them. They didn't replace him. Offensively, Gaudreau hasn't looked as good. I feel like Monahan also hasn't looked as good. That's literally 2/3 of their top 6. I think it's going to be tough for them to kind of replicate what Giordano did on defense. Markstrom as well, I don't think was as good in Calgary as was in Vancouver. They really don't have any great young players that I see kind of pushing in and elevating this team to the next step. So I feel like they'll be a decent team. Obviously, they're finishing 5th in the division, but still not a playoff team. After them, I have the Vancouver Canucks finishing 4th. I feel like similar to Calgary, Vancouver will be competitive, but not a playoff team. I think both wildcard spots in the West will be going to Central teams. I think the Canucks do have some really young, promising players in Hollander, Peterson and Hughes, obviously, Besser, Horvat. They got a nice top 6 there. Ekman Larsson, I think, improves their defense, although not a great deal, as I think, he is overpaid, but still a solid enough defenseman. I like their goalie in Thatcher Demko. But when I look at their team, I think the two biggest things they're lacking are good defensive defensemen. Quinn Hughes is amazing, obviously, but he's all offense. And even with the addition of Ekman Larsson, he's also primarily an offensive defenseman. And in regards to their forwards, I like the top 6. Not a huge fan of their bottom 6. So I think it'll be really close. I see them finishing 1 to 5 points out of the playoffs, but I feel like they're just going to miss. Now, number 3 here, this might be a surprise to some people. I have the Seattle Kraken. They're a team that has 0 superstars, but I just think that they're solid throughout. I really like their goaltending duo of Grubauer-Drieger, just play the hot hand. I think defensively, sort of opposite to Vancouver, they have a lot of solid defensive defensemen. Of course, Giordano was just named their captain. They got Adam Larson, Jamie Alexiak, Vince Dunn. I feel like they have solid defense there. And in terms of their offense, they didn't draft the best, but I thought the signing of James Schwartz was really nice. Yanni Gourde, I think, in a bigger role could play really well. And in terms of their depth, because every single team was protecting their top 6 forwards, they got their pick of the best bottom 6 forwards in the NHL. So I feel like they actually have a solid bottom 6 forward as well. So again, I feel like kind of similar to Vegas their first year. They're not going to do as well, I don't think, making the Stanley Cup final, but a team with no superstars that has really good depth is actually a pretty decent team in the NHL. So I have them finishing 3rd there in the Pacific. I think, them and Vancouver, they're going to be very close for that 3rd spot. Number 2 now in the Pacific, I have the Edmonton Oilers. I think it's pretty hard to bet against McDavid, Draisaitl. I think they finished 1 and 2 in scoring the last 2 years. Those two guys pretty much will will the Oilers into a playoff spot. It's kind of cheating because we did see 1 game, but Zach Hyman looked really good, honestly, on that Oilers team. Defensively, I didn't really like what they did this summer, trading for Keith, adding CC, but I'm a big fan of Darnell Nurse. I like Tyson Barrie on the power play, even though people think, he's a terrible defenseman. He still puts up points. Points lead to goals. Goals win games. Evan Bouchard, I think, could take a step. Mike Smith and Koskinen, not a huge fan of that goalie duo, but I think it's good enough at least with the great forwards they have to get second in the West and be back in the playoffs. Pretty simple prediction there. And then finally, finishing number 1 in the Pacific, we have the Vegas Golden Knights. I think that they're just a juggernaut in this division. I don't think I mentioned it yet, but Pacific's probably the weakest division, so Vegas should be racking up the points here. Especially, there's some rumors they could land Jack Eichel. If they do, like, they're just even more the favorite to win this division, in my opinion. But you got guys like Mark Stone, Max Pacioretty. They still have the depth there. Marchessault, Carlson, Riley Smith. I think one of the best D pairs in the NHL, or at least top 2 defensemen, should say, because they don't always play together. In Pietrangelo and Theodore. Really like Robin Leonard and net. Without a doubt, they're the team to beat in the Pacific. Now moving on, guys, to the Central Division. I feel like I took a little too long in the Pacific. Gonna try and be a bit quicker here. Last place, without a doubt, no question about it, Arizona Coyotes. I feel like them and the Buffalo Sabres are just gonna be battling it out for last place. Best odds to get Shane Wright. Pretty much deja vu of 2015 when these two teams were battling it out to get Connor McDavid, and then neither one got him. Could definitely see this happening again this year with neither one landing Shane Wright. Now number 7 in the Central. This one was pretty tough as there's really no terrible team after the Coyotes here, but I think it's gonna be the Chicago Blackhawks. I'm just not a fan of that team. Fleury I really like, but I do think he obviously benefited from a good defense in front of him in Vegas. Chicago, that's not the case. He's also getting a little bit older. Maybe this is the year he starts to fall off. In terms of the offense, obviously adding back Taves and Doc is a big step, but Taves getting older, just sat out for an entire year. Talking about depth, I feel like after Chicago's top 6, they probably have one of the worst bottom 6s I've seen in the NHL. So just not a huge fan of this makeup. Obviously making that big trade for Seth Jones should have improved the team, but honestly, I don't think it was worth giving up the 2 first-round picks. Adam Boquist. I feel like Seth Jones does not move the needle for me on the Blackhawks making the playoffs. After them, a team sort of in a similar position. I don't think they're a playoff team, nor do I think they're terrible. That's the Nashville Predators. Obviously, they lost Arvidsson and Ellis. I think those are 2 big losses. Saros, though, is an amazing goalie. If he plays amazing again, who knows, maybe they somehow squeak in, but it's going to be even tougher for him this year than it was last year, and he just barely got them in last season. Defensively, they still have Yossi, they still have Ekholm, so I mean, that's a good sign, but again, I think Ellis is a big loss there. Offensively, Johansson, Duchesne really need to turn it around. Maybe Tolvanen, steps up there in that top 6. Philip Forsberg, of course, still a very, very good winger, but again, not a terrible team, not a playoff team. They're somewhere in the middle for me. Now, number 5 here, guys, the first wildcard team in the West. I had the Minnesota Wild. I'm not gonna lie, I actually think losing Parise and Suter made their team worse. Obviously, saved a bunch of cap right now, but then they get dinged for almost the whole cap hit years 2 and 3. Especially Suter, he was still a solid defenseman. That's why Dallas signed him, and didn't really bring in anyone to replace them. Now, I feel like between Talbot and Kakinen, they should get decent goaltending. Luckily for them, they still have solid defense with Spurgeon, Dumba, Brodin. Kaprizov, first year in the NHL, looked amazing. No reason he shouldn't get better. Guys like Fiala, Eric Sinek, a lot of good young players there, should continue to improve. So I see them making the playoffs, but I don't see them being higher than a wild card spot. I'm not as high on them as I think other people are. If, say, Nashville took this wild card spot from Minnesota, I would not be surprised at all. At number 4 here in the Central, guys, the next wild card spot, I actually just mentioned them signing Ryan Suter. It is the Dallas Stars. I think getting a healthy Tyler Seguin back is a huge improvement to that team. In terms of goaltending, if one of their 4 goaltenders can play well, they should be okay. They have the most goalies in the league for whatever reason. Ben Bishop, still injured once he's back, is an elite goalie in my opinion. Brain Holtby, looking to rebound, just, play some decent games for them. Jake Onger, really good up-and-coming young goalie. Anton Khudobin looked pretty solid for them in different stretches last season. So just play the hot hand between 4 of those guys, you should be okay. Defensively, Heiskanen, Klingberg, Lindell, Suter in the mix. They look pretty good to me. Offensively, like I mentioned, a healthy Sagan is a huge boost to that team. Pavelski pretty much had a career year last year. Jamie Benn looking to rebound. Roop Hintz, Robertson, Gurianov, some good young forwards. I like Dallas a lot. For me, they should be a lock as a playoff team. After that, with the 3rd spot in the Central, I have the St. Louis Blues. Another team I really like the look of the roster. I feel like Jordan Binnington's still a solid goaltender. A lot of people hate on him for being hot-headed or whatever, but you look at the stats, he's a solid goalie. In terms of defense, obviously losing Vince Dunn was a big loss, but still have Torrey Krug, Justin Falk, Colton Parayko. I feel like they're decent there. Offensively, they brought in Brandon Sauter to replace James Schwartz. Brain Shen is there. I think if Tarasenko's healthy, he'll be a big boost. Of course, they have David Perron, who also just had a career year, similar to Joe Pavelski. These guys are getting older, but still playing crazy. I think they have some good young players like Jordan Kyrou, like Robert Thomas, looking to take that next step. I think St. Louis should be a playoff team as well. Number 2 here in the Central Division, I have the Winnipeg Jets. I really like what Winnipeg did this offseason. I think their weakest point by far was defense. They added Nate Schmidt and Brendan Dillon to help round out that top 4 with Morrissey and Pionk. They also still have Dylan DeMello and Logan Stanley on the bottom pair, so like their defense actually looks pretty good now. Connor Hellebuck and net, I think, is probably the second best goalie in the league behind Vasilevsky. I think they have one of the best first lines in hockey in Connor, Scheifele, Wheeler, and the fact that they have guys like Dubois and Ehlers behind that line who can help on the power play, who are very good players, and some good young players coming up too. Perfetti made the team, Christian Vesalainen looking to make that next jump. I see Winnipeg having a very, very good season. And finally, first in the Central, I also have this team winning the President's Trophy, if that matters. It's the Colorado Avalanche. They are just so good top to bottom. Lost Grubauer, brought in Kemper. Pretty much, should get similar goaltending from him. Defensively, Cale Makar, Samuel Girard, Devin Taves, Eric Johnson. Good young defensemen like Bowen Byram. They're just so stacked. Offensively, probably the best first line in hockey in Landeskog, McKinnon, Rantanen. Good players behind it as well, with guys like Kadri, Burakovsky, young players at forward as well, like Alex Newhook. They are just so stacked. I think the Colorado Avalanche are just going to have an incredible year. And I feel like most of the time the teams with high expectations very rarely meet them, but the Lightning had high expectations last season, won back-to-back cups. We'll see if, the Avalanche can come through this season. Now, moving to the Eastern Conference, guys, we're going to start off with the Atlantic Division. In 8th place here, I already mentioned them being, basement dwellers of the Coyotes. It's the Buffalo Sabres, especially once they inevitably lose Jack Eichel. I actually saw a tweet of what their roster is looking like tonight. It is just so tough to look at. I feel bad, honestly. The Sabres fans don't deserve that. I honestly feel like they've been through 3 different rebuilds over the past 10 years, never once made the playoffs. They're entering another one. It is just such a terrible situation. So, I feel bad for Sabres fans, but if you look at that roster, no one's going to argue they're the worst team in the Atlantic. Now, the second worst team, this is a toss-up for me between Detroit and Ottawa. Honestly, I'm going to go with the Senators here. I compared the two teams. I feel like a lot of people are underrating Red Wings, and we have so many good young players like Seider, like Raymond, like Zadina. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised by just how good of players they are. So, at 7 here, the Ottawa Senators, I think Matt Murray is a decent goalie, but not as good as Nhl. In terms of the defense, they have Shabbat and then nothing else pretty much. Now, offensively, they're pretty nice. They got Batherson, they got Norris, they got Brady Tkachuk, obviously, who just signed, some other really good young players, but I feel they're going to be competitive, much more competitive than they've been in seasons past, but not a playoff team, especially Atlantic Division should be pretty tough this year. Of course, like as I mentioned, Red Wings at 6. I feel like Alex Nhl definitely improves our goaltending. Was a Calder nominee last year. Grice behind him, very solid backup. Defensively, Seider's a big part of that D. Letty's good for helping out the power play. DeKaiser's still solid when healthy. Troy Stetcher's a decent defenseman. I think we're decent there, definitely better than Ottawa. And then in terms of the offense, Larkin has to be better, but he really can't be worse than he was last year. Bertuzzi should be good in the games he actually plays for us. I think Veranda, when he's back, will be a big addition. And like I said, Lucas Raymond pretty much filling in for Veranda right now. I think is going to be a Calder nominee this year. I think Zadina might have a breakout season as well. Even a guy like, say, Pius Suter playing a bigger role on the Red Wings should be a good look for us. So I'm having the Red Wings pick 6. I haven't seen anyone pick them this high, but I don't think that's, crazy of a prediction. Now, number 5 here. You guys aren't going to like me for this one, my French fans. Montreal Canadiens, I have at number 5 here. Not in a wild card spot. I feel like they're going to be a decent team this year. They're going to be competing, but I think they're going to fall a little bit short. Basically, last year was a Cinderella run. They were the worst ranked team to make the playoffs, and then obviously we all know what happened. They made it to the Stanley Cup final. I feel like their luck's going to run out here, and they'll be decent. Not good enough to make the playoffs. I feel Carey Price would have to absolutely stand on his head, and obviously he's not playing right now. The loss of Shea Weber for them, I think, is huge. Also, too, they lost Philip Deneau, who's really big for them on the PK. All those defensive draws. They lost Kokaniemi, who obviously was overpaid, but still they lost a player there. So I feel Montreal Canadiens aren't going to be as good this season as they were last season, and last year they just barely made it in. So I think 5 is a fair prediction. Now, number 4 here in the Atlantic, I do have this team making the playoffs, and that's the Boston Bruins. I feel like they're still a playoff team, even with all the losses. Tuukka Rask is a huge one. Now, he could come back if he does. Huge boost for them, and if not, Linus Ullmark, I think, still very capable starting goaltender. Defensively, Charlie McAvoy, one of the best defensemen in the league. The depth's not the greatest, but I feel like it's good enough when it's healthy. I know last year they were injured a bit, and it looked pretty terrible. Offensively, I feel Krejci's a big loss. Him and Hall were so nice together. Charlie Coyle and Hall, I don't think is going to be quite as good a duo. First line, of course, is intact. Second best line, I think, in hockey behind the Colorado one, Marchand, Bergeron, Pastrnak. They're going to do a lot of the heavy loading for that offense. So I think, they had some big losses there. Not to mention the fact two of their best players aren't getting any younger in Bergeron and Marchand. So still a playoff team, but I think they regress a little bit. Number 3 here in the Atlantic, I had the Florida Panthers. Now, I think whether it's Spencer Knight, whether it's Bobrovsky, play the hot hand, it'll probably be Spencer Knight. When you look at last year, he could end up being one of the best goalies in the league in 4 or 5 years' time. Defensively, I think they have a really solid defense there, led by Ekblad and Mackenzie Weegar. Offensively, they were already solid last year with guys like Huberdeau and Barkov, and I thought they made some really nice additions, bringing in Sam Reinhart for pretty much nothing. That's going to be huge. Sam Bennett continues to play like he did with Florida throughout this season. He's looking like a legit top 6 player. Some guys on that team that really stepped it up last year, Anthony Duclair, Carter Verhaeghe. They got to keep that up. If they do, I see there's no reason why Florida can't be the 3 spot in the Atlantic. Next up here, number 2, I have the Toronto Maple Leafs. Some people might think this is high for Toronto, but it's hard to bet against some of those superstar players. Matthews, Tavares, Marner, Nylander. Like, when those guys are on their game, they're tough to beat. And I feel like they did a pretty good job filling in some of those holes on offense with cheap, good players in Nick Ritchie, Andre Kasha, Jason Spezza's still there, Wayne Simmons still there. Same with Alex Kerfoot. I know a lot of people are really high on Michael Bunting. We'll see what happens there. But for me, the Leafs, yeah, it's definitely still one of the best teams in the Atlantic. Defensively, Riley, Muzzin, Brody, Hall, I think, is a fine top 4. Jack Campbell looked great last year. Even if he doesn't play the best, they got Peter Mrazek there now as well. They should still be a very good team in the Atlantic. But I think that Tampa Bay are still the team to beat. Even all of the players they lost last year, Yanni Gord, Blake Coleman, Tyler Johnson. I'm pretty sure I just named their entire third line. They still look so good. Their top 6 remain intact, and we all saw in the playoffs when Kucherov's in there how good it really is. The bottom 6, I also think doesn't look too bad. They added Corey Perry, some solid AHL players making the jump. Defensively, I don't think they lost any of their defense, so that's huge. And then they had the best goal in the league in Vasilevsky and net. It's pretty tough to bet against the back-to-back Cup winners, so that's why I have them finishing first in the Atlantic as well as the Eastern Conference. Now, finally, guys, the last division in the East, the Metropolitan Division. I see this division being the most competitive division in the NHL this year. I don't think they're going to have any of the best teams or any of the worst teams. I feel like just all these teams are so close. It's going to be so competitive. I could see, every team in this division finishing between, say, like 80 and 92 points. It's just going to be that close. So, having said that, I have the Columbus Blue Jackets finishing last place here. Now, although they're last in the division, I feel like they'll probably be, honestly, 7th, 8th last in the NHL. Just all those worst teams can be in other divisions, so I want that to kind of be known. Just looking at the Blue Jackets team there, it's so young and unproven. Other than Nerwinski, there's really not a lot there on defense. I think Merzlikins the starting goalie, with Korpisalo, of course, making a really good tandem. Offensively, though, a lot of guys looking to rebound. Patrick Laine is the star of that team. He's got to come through. And honestly, aside from Laine, I feel like there's no game breakers in that offense, so a ton of guys are going to have to take the next step. Now, number 7 here in the Metro, another team who I think is going to do a lot better this year, but still falls short just because this division is so competitive. That's the New Jersey Devils. I love the signing of Dougie Hamilton. I think Thomas Tatar helps them out. I think Hughes and Hischier are going to be getting better. Strankovic and Kukkinen both look like pretty decent players. They also added Ryan Graves on defense as well. Mackenzie Blackwood's a decent goalie. It's just, for me, when I look at their team compared to other teams, I feel like the other teams have better star players and just as good depth, better goaltenders. It's hard for me to pick the Devils. So unless they, really exceed expectations here, I have them finishing in the 7th spot. Now, number 6 here, this one was tough for me. I have the New York Rangers. I know a lot of people see them as a playoff team this year, but I don't know. I was looking at it, and I like Shesterkin and net, but then I look at their defense, and they have Adam Fox. The rest of those guys, I'm just not a huge fan of. I feel like a lot of guys there that haven't proven anything or underperformers like Jacob Trouba. Offensively, huge fan of Zibanejad Panarin. But I feel like Buchnevich was a huge loss for them, and Sammy Blais doesn't really replace that. Now, Alexis Lafreniere could kind of step into that role. Last season, though, he didn't really do anything to prove that, so I'd basically be betting on him becoming much better than he was last season. Same with a guy like Capo Caco. So for me right now, I look at the Rangers. I see them as a competitive team, but not a playoff team. And next up here at number 5, I have the Carolina Hurricanes. So I feel like they're going to fall just short of the playoffs, and there's going to be a lot of talk about not bringing Dougie Hamilton back, trade away Alex Manoljevic, because I think both those moves are going to prove costly for them. When you look at their roster, I feel like it's a good team. Obviously, some great forwards in Aho, Teravainen, and Svechnikov. Still a solid defense with Slavin, with Pesci. In terms of the goaltending, I think Anderson is pretty decent, especially Ranta backing him up when healthy. But I think it's a worse roster than last year, and I don't think it's as good as a roster as the 4 teams above them who I have making the playoffs. So finishing 4th in the Metro, also claiming a wildcard spot in the East, I had the Philadelphia Flyers. I feel like they have to bounce back from last season. They got some of the worst goaltending in the NHL with Carter Hart. I think he cannot play that bad again, so I have him playing a little bit better. And honestly, if he only plays a little bit better, that pretty much makes the Flyers a playoff team. I think they added Ryan Ellis, which is just such an improvement in defense, power play as well. The addition of Ristolainen I don't think was that great, but they didn't really give up a lot to get him, so it's fine. Offensively, I still think they have one of the better forward groups in that division, with the likes of Giroux, Couturier, Konechny, Farabee, JVR. They brought in Atkinson for Voracek, which I think was a pretty much lateral move. Not really sure why either team did it, to be honest. So I have the Flyers getting back in the playoffs this year. And after them, I had the Washington Capitals in third. I feel like it's tough to bet against Ovi making the playoffs. He's done it pretty much every season of his career, so that's the main thing. Then, of course, look at the rest of that offense with Kuznetsov, Backstrom, Ovi, Mantha in the mix now. Should be a pretty solid offense. Defensively, too, they still have John Carlson leading that thing with Orlov. Goaltending-wise, I feel like between Samsonov and Vanacek, they'll get decent goaltending. For me, they're pretty much a playoff lock in that Metro division. After them, number 2 are the Pittsburgh Penguins. Pretty much the same deal as Ovechkin. It's hard to bet against Crosby because you look at his career, and the dude just makes the playoffs. It's what he does. Same goes for Malkin, since obviously they've been tied to the hip since they came in. Now, having said that, Crosby is missing a little bit of time here at the start of the season. Malkin, I think, is out for a couple months. But Jake Gensel, I think, is going to show everybody just how good he is when he performs without those two. And they actually have, a decent amount of forward depth, I think, that they can at least survive the first few games before they get Crosby back and then obviously start playing like themselves. Defensively, I think is honestly really solid with Letang, with Marino, with Dumoulin. I like to look at their defense. Goaltending for me is a big question for them, with Tristan Jarry as a starter, to Smith backing him up. But kind of similar to Carter Hart, I feel like Jarry just has to be better than he was last year, and he didn't look too bad in the playoffs. So if he continues that into the regular season, they should be a playoff team once again. And finally, guys, first place in the Metro. I don't think I've actually ever predicted them to get first in the Metro, is the New York Islanders. For me, number one thing for them is goaltending. I think they have the best goalie duo in the league in Semyon Varlamov and Ilya Sorokin. They're both just so good, and with such a solid defense in front of them, it's tough to score on the Islanders. Even after losing Nick Leddy, they still have one of the best top D pairs in the NHL in Adam Pelech and Ryan Pollock. They've also got Noah Dobson, who I think is going to be getting better. Maybe he'll step into that more offensive role Leddy had. Signs Zdeno Chara, which just makes them even tougher to play against. He's really old, but he's still huge, and I'm sure he makes it tough for the other players to play against. Scott Mayfield, Andy Green, capable bottom pair. In terms of their offense, they got the best fourth line in hockey. They got Matt Barzal, who's a great player. Anders Lee's coming back from injury. They did lose Jordan Eberle, but Palmieri, I think, is going to fill in nicely for his spot. Oliver Wallstrom's a good up-and-coming forward. I mean, honestly, not even just their top 6, their top 9 is very, very solid. So I have the Islanders finishing first in the Metros. I think they're just the most solid team from top to bottom. And in terms of the Stanley Cup guys, I have it going to the President's Trophy winner in the Colorado Avalanche. Again, I look at that team and I just think they are the best team. Not only are they the best team, when you look at the roster, you look at them play, they're also the best team analytically. So basically, they're just the best in every facet. And if I had to put money on it, I'm going to put the money where the numbers are and put it on the Avalanche. But in hockey, anything can happen. That's why they play the game. So it should be a fun 82-game season. Hopefully no one hates me too much for these. Honestly, I would love to be wrong, because if I'm right, then it's going to be kind of a boring season if everything goes as expected. The more I'm wrong, the more surprised there are. I honestly welcome it. This is just for fun. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, leave that thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit the sub button. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye.